Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm sorry we can't be there together again today, but we are going to finish England in the Age of Absolutism. As always, I do encourage you to take notes during the video lecture because you never know when you might be able to use your notes for test time, for vocab, anything like that. So just to review what we learned about in Friday, kind of day one of England in the Age of Absolutism. So do remember, the reason that England is a little bit different is because they saw early limitations on the monarch. So when these absolute monarchs try to come out and act absolute, the people of England are like, wait a minute, we've seen early limitations and we know that you don't have to be absolute. So the very first one was in 1215 with the writing of the Magna Carta against bad King John. The second one is when King Edward I created Parliament, and the big power that he gives away to Parliament is the ability to tax. And then sort of the last limitation was Queen Elizabeth and her recognition of Parliament. It's not Elizabeth herself. I noticed this on some of your review questions. It's not Elizabeth herself because she was an absolute monarch, but what's really important is that she allows Parliament to continue, she works with them, and she allows them to keep the power of the purse, or the power to tax. So those three things, the Magna Carta, the Parliament, and Elizabeth solidifying the Parliament, those are all three limitations the people of England had, and so they knew that their monarchs didn't have to rule absolutely. But we did see a couple of guys come out and try to do just that. The first one that we learned about was James I. This guy was not well liked. Number one, he wasn't English, he was Scottish. So right away the people didn't like him. Tries to show absolutism, again, by building onto the Hampton Court Palace, competing in the balance of power. His translation of the Bible, again, promoting the Protestant religion. His dynasty is Charles I, and again, this guy truly believes he has divine right to rule. It's his dynasty chosen by God. Just like Dad, he's really bad. Kind of the big thing, he has issues with Parliament, taxing without their consent, and then once he does get them to tax, he basically dissolves them. Again, the people are going to be very against this because they know that's not how their government is supposed to be because of those early limitations. So we really saw this kind of come to a head when Charles started to move north, and he was basically forming an army against his own people. And this is what's going to be known as the English Civil War. So you remember the two sides that we have in the English Civil War. So on one side, you've got the Royalists, who are also known as the Cavaliers, and they're loyal to Charles I. And this is a large part of the population in England. But on the flip side, you've got the Parliamentarians, or the Roundheads, and they're led by Oliver Cromwell. And again, a lot of the population is loyal to them too. So the question I asked you guys, the very last one from Friday, is not to look ahead, but who do you think is actually going to win this? Is it going to be Charles I and the Cavaliers, the Royalists, or Cromwell and the Roundheads and the Parliamentarians? Well, it is going to be Cromwell and the Parliamentarians. They are going to be successful on the battlefield against Charles I, and they are going to defeat the Cavaliers and the Royalists. Now, once Cromwell and the Parliamentarians win, though, that's kind of only half the battle, because you have to kind of think, England has never had this before. We've always had an absolute monarchy. Everybody else in England, or excuse me, everybody else in Europe is currently operating as an absolute monarch. So what do you actually create in its wake? Well, this is going to be known as the Puritan Commonwealth. So basically what these guys are going to create after the English Civil War is a constitutional republic. They are going to write a constitution. They are going to create the position of an executive. Of course, Cromwell is going to fill that. Basically, the number one thing that is stated in this new government, in this new constitution, is that there is no monarch. Because again, you really have to go back to, well, what were we fighting against in the English Civil War? We don't want to have an absolute monarch. We know that's not the way it has to be. And see, the English people knew that because of those early limitations. It's just kind of interesting that the rest of Europe, so Spain and Austria and Prussia, especially France, everybody was super appalled by this because nobody else has this. Everybody else is operating under an absolute monarch. So what England is doing, everybody else thinks this is absolutely disgusting. Nobody else is recognizing this. Like, nobody will trade or do business with England because they cannot believe what's happening. I think that kind of came to a pinnacle moment when actually that Puritan Commonwealth, and again led by the executive Cromwell, they actually behead Charles I. Now this is going to be the only monarch to actually be beheaded in England. This was a huge deal. You guys have to stop and think about the significance of this. They've actually just beheaded an absolute monarch. We've never seen this in Europe before. We've never seen this in England before. No other country has done this. So if you talk about truly being disliked by the other European powers now, I think this was a really big moment. That the king, for the crimes contained in the charge, should be carried back to the place from whence he came, and thence to the place of execution, where his head should be severed from his body. Again, they actually killed Charles I. They beheaded him. Everybody in Europe is super, super shocked by this. Again, I love this woman down here in the front. She's actually fainted because it was too much. But I actually do think this says a lot, because I think this is going to kind of be a little bit too much even for the people of England. And Cromwell doesn't help. He actually goes on what's known as Pride's Purge in 1648. See, this is a problem we're going to see sometimes with wars, is that people will become so afraid of losing that they actually kind of do a 180, and then they start killing their own people. France is going to be super, super bad about this in just a little bit. But basically what Cromwell does is he goes through Parliament, he goes through the House of Commons, and he kills anybody that's not like super, super adamant and super, super loyal to his cause. Like if you were like, well, maybe I don't think we should have beheaded Charles I, he would have had you killed for that. So needless to say, we like won the Civil War, and we got our Constitution, and we got our Commonwealth and our executive, but now it's kind of going in the opposite direction. And that's why I say, Cromwell, is he Lord Protector and executive, or is he starting to act like a king? You remember what we fought a civil war to get rid of. The people of England just kind of long for an end to this. You know, was it really that bad under the absolute monarchs? Is it better now that we have, you know, this executor who's leading a Pride's Purge? It's kind of like, is the grass truly greener on the other side? Cromwell is going to die, and his son Richard will assume that position of executive, but he's very, very weak. He's not like Dad, and it's actually going to only last for 2 more years. So you have to kind of ask yourself, what's going to happen next? Are we going to continue with this Commonwealth, with this position of an executive? Are we going to bring back a monarch? That is what's known as the Restoration. We are definitely bringing back that monarch. Again, I know this is super, super foreign to us here in the United States, but you guys have to remember that in Europe, that's what the people know is an absolute monarchy. And I love this line right here. Parliament could no more exist without the crown than the crown without Parliament. Again, it's the most important lesson of the Civil War. It's almost like the people of England need both. We want a monarch, but we know they can be limited. So now we're going to bring in Charles I's son, who is Charles II. Charles II is very well liked. He has a lot of charm. He has a lot of poise, a lot of political skills. Now, you're going to have to play your cards just right, because you just saw your dad get beheaded by the people. So if you're going to come in and be the king, you have to tread very, very lightly. And he's very good about this. Again, that's what I mean by political skills. You have to kind of give the people what they want within some boundaries. He's going to restore the theaters, reopen the pubs, reopen the brothels, again, keep the people happy, favored religious toleration, again, being a Protestant, but tolerating the Catholics. So it seems like England is going in the right direction. We've got a monarch, but they are ruling limited. And then Charles II dies. And Charles II did not have a son, so power has to pass to his brother, James II. This guy's not a good guy. This guy thinks like his uncle and his dad, and that they should have the right to rule absolutely. He's going to openly practice his Catholic faith, which is not a good thing, because remember, we've had this whole Reformation in England between the Protestants and the Catholics. It gets even worse when he puts Catholics in high public official positions. Now, Parliament is still around, and remember, they won the Civil War, so they know the type of power they can wield. So actually, Parliament and a lot of the people, they want James II to step down, and they want his Protestant daughter, Mary, to rule in his stead. And this is going to be known as the Glorious Revolution, because that in fact will happen. James II is going to step down. He is not killed. Remember, Charles I is the only monarch of England to be beheaded. But the Glorious Revolution, basically what happens is Mary and her husband William of Orange, they come in as Protestants and they are going to rule England. Now, big difference, you guys, these are not absolute monarchs that you're looking at. These are limited monarchs. These two are very well liked by the people of England. Number one, they hate France, which again, any Englishman is going to tell you they love, because England and France have fought each other since they existed as kingdoms. Both of those are Protestants, but they will tolerate the Catholic faith. Now you stop and think about it. Okay, so you are the people of England. You've seen this like back and forth between the monarchs, between parliaments, who's going to be more powerful. I would probably I would probably want to write this down, and that is what they are going to end up doing. I gave you guys a family tree just so you could kind of see. I know we've had a, I know we've had a lot of Jameses, a lot of Charles. You can see right here, here's James I. He was our first absolute monarch of England. And then came his son, Charles I. But this is the guy we fought in the English Civil War, and this is the guy that lost his head. So then we bring in his son, Charles II. Again, good guy, ends up dying though without a son, so we have to bring in his brother, James II, but we don't like this guy. So then we bring in his daughter, and basically son-in-law, and that's William and Mary. But what I was saying about the English wanting to write this down, again, I think it'd be pretty smart to do so, and that's what becomes known as the English Bill of Rights in 1689. Basically, this is going to settle all of the major issues between the monarchy and the parliament. Well, what rights does the monarchy have? What rights does the parliament have? What rights do the people have? And from here on out, you guys, because of this one document, this is why England today is known as a constitutional monarchy. We still have a monarch in England. It's Queen Elizabeth II, but you also still have a parliament. Because since 1689, in this one document, the English Bill of Rights, that outlined, well, who has what specific powers, what are your powers, what are your limitations. That's why they are a limited monarchy. That's why they are a constitutional monarchy. So you guys don't necessarily have to add this to your notes, but I just wanted you to see it. This is a translation of the English Bill of Rights. It is much, much longer than this, but these are just some of the main provisions. Again, you think about, oh my gosh, look at everything that England has been through with, you know, the reign of James I and Charles I, and that was super awful because of the Absolutism, and then the Civil War, and then Cromwell, and then the Restoration, and then the Glorious Revolution. So these are some of the things they felt necessary to include in the English Bill of Rights. We have the king could not suspend the operation of the laws. The king could not interfere with the ordinary course of justice. No taxes levied or standard army maintained in peacetime without Parliament's consent. Again, I think this one has major reflection on the English Civil War. Freedom of speech in Parliament. Sessions of Parliament would be held frequently. Again, I think this is going back to James I and Charles I. Subject had the right of bail, petition, and freedom from excessive fines and cruel and unusual punishment. Hopefully you recognize this phrase right here. Some of these things are going to be basically taken word for word and put into our Bill of Rights and our Constitution. The monarch must be a Protestant, which they still are to this day. Freedom from arbitrary arrest and censorship of the press was dropped. This is what the actual English Bill of Rights looks like. I saw this in the British Library. One of the best ways I can describe what England was like in the age of absolutism, it's like a seesaw. So you kind of think we start and the absolute monarchy is all powerful, and then it shifts in the Civil War and the Parliament and the people are all powerful, but we don't really like that. So then we have to shift back and the absolute monarch becomes all powerful again, but we don't like that. So finally we have to balance it out with this constitutional or this limited monarchy, and that's what we got with the English Bill of Rights. So here's what I want you guys to do today for your assignment for our Snowy Learning Day. I want you to imagine that you are a member of Parliament with the writing of the English Bill of Rights. Again, this is a major document, you guys. It's going to set the course for England's government from there on out. What should be written in the English Bill of Rights, in your opinion? Now you're going to write 10 provisions of your own in complete sentences, and you can number them 1 through 10. again, you kind of have to think about everything that England has gone through. What should be the rights and limitations of the monarch? What should be the rights, limitations of the parliament? What about the people? What should be their rights and limitations? So I want to see what your top 10 are. And again, we'll write that in our standard format, Times New Roman, 12-point font, double spaced. Again, you can number them 1 through 10. Email me if you have any questions, and good luck, you guys.